Western leaders and security agencies are spending huge amounts of resources on getting into Russian President Vladimir Putin's head. It's a futile exercise at times when the West has thought Russia's war in Ukraine might be losing steam. Mr. Putin has doubled down, sending his forces to maternity hospitals and shelters harboring children. Now, an apparent pause in the advancement of Russian troops has the West guessing. Has Russia's war effort stalled? Or is it a tactical regrouping? Over 100 survivors freed from Ukraine theater. Russian President Vladimir Putin chairs a meeting with members of the government via teleconference in Moscow on March 10, 2022. Either way, an incendiary Stalinesque speech on Wednesday night, in which Mr. Putin called Russians opposing the war traitors, marked a change in tone and a sign that not all is going to plan, experts said. Perhaps more worrying, many observers saw it as a sign that the head of the Russian state, facing setback in Ukraine, would take a vengeful turn at home and crack down more forcefully than ever on any sign of dissent. While some Russians support the war, many others are protesting against it in the streets, fully aware they will be rounded up by heavily armed police even for the most peaceful of demonstrations. The Russian state has made mass protests illegal, and now, insulting the military is against the law. Still, people show up in groups, while others demonstrate entirely alone. Even lone protesters have been detained, social media videos have shown. Journalist Marina Ovsyannikova holds an anti-war protest sign behind a Russian newsreader. A journalist who jumped on camera on a state-controlled news program, holding an anti-war sign, has become a cause célèbre for free speech in Russia. A renowned ballerina has left the Bolshoi. Russian prisoners of war are calling Mr. Putin out for using propaganda to justify the war. Mr. Putin, who has enjoyed consistently high ratings in Russia, is now turning to a strategy of intimidation to keep Russians on side, experts said. Russia could default on its debt within days. A picture of Russian President Vladimir Putin hangs at a target practice range in Lviv, Western Ukraine, Thursday, March 17, 2022. His speech Wednesday hinted darkly that those Russians who do not side with him were, in essence, traitors, chilling words in a country where mass political repressions and the Gulag system are still within living memory. The West will try to rely on the so-called fifth column, on national traitors, on those who earn money here with us but live there. And I mean live there not even in the geographical sense of the word, but according to their thoughts, their slavish consciousness, Mr. Putin said. Russia purposefully and cynically destroys drama center in besieged city. The fifth column usually refers to sympathizers of the enemy during a war. Such people who by their very nature are mentally located there, and not here, are not with our people, not with Russia, Mr. Putin said, mocking them as the type that cannot live without oysters and gender freedom. But any people, and even more so the Russian people, will always be able to distinguish true patriots from scum and traitors, and simply spit them out like a gnat that accidentally flew into their mouths. Spit them out on the pavement, he said. Russian President Vladimir Putin speaks during a meeting on measures of socio-economic support of the regions via video conference at the Novogaryovo residence outside Moscow, Russia, Wednesday, March 16, 2022. For Tatiana Stanovaya, founder of the political analysis firm Politik, Mr. Putin's speech proved the leader's plan has derailed. It seems to me that everything is starting to crumble with Putin. This speech of his is despair, strong emotion, impotence, she wrote on her official Telegram account. Pointing to the situation in Russia, Stanovaya argues that Mr. Putin is losing the battle of popularity too. This is the beginning of the end. Yes, they will twist everyone's elbows, lock them up, imprison them, but it is already all without a future. Everything will crack and slip. Elizabeth Braw, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, said Mr. Putin's speech reflected how isolated the Russian leader had become. What we saw as the war began, and what we have seen since, including last night's speech, is really the result of a man whose entire world takes place inside his head, Ms. Braw told CNN. explaining how Putin had isolated intensely during the pandemic and was now more cut off as Western sanctions batter the Russian economy. She said that he was likely surprised and angered by how far the West has gone with sanctions, and was now worried of the backlash that would likely soon come from the Russian people. There is a sort of humiliation of a country that is now seeing McDonald's close, where Russians are flocking to IKEA to get every last item that's available before it leaves the country. That is humiliating, and of course, also rather frightening when you think of the potential reaction among the Russian public once these consumer goods are no longer available, she said. Mr. Putin's ominous warning to Russians came as the UK's Defence Ministry said the invasion had largely stalled on all fronts. Ukrainian firefighters extinguish a blaze at a warehouse after on the outskirts of Kiev, Ukraine, Thursday, March 17, 2022. Russian forces destroyed a theater in Mariupol where hundreds of people were sheltering Wednesday and rained fire on other cities, Ukrainian authorities said, even as the two sides projected optimism over efforts to negotiate an end to the fighting. A man walks with a bicycle in a street damaged by shelling in Mariupol, Ukraine, March 10, 2022. In talks between Russia and Ukraine toward a possible ceasefire, after 3 weeks of intense fighting, negotiators are exploring prospects of possible neutrality for Ukraine. Russian forces have made minimal progress on land, sea or air in recent days and they continue to suffer heavy losses, the ministry tweeted Thursday, adding that Ukrainian resistance remained staunch and well-coordinated. That chimes with the assessment from a senior U.S. defense official, who told reporters on Monday that Russian forces in and around several key cities had made no appreciable progress over the prior weekend. It may be wishful thinking to read so much into this pause. Russia's military is far mightier than Ukraine's by every measure. Any stall is more likely to be tactical than a sign of Russia backing down. Nonetheless, Russia's invasion hasn't brought easy pickings for Mr. Putin. In 2014, Russia was able to annex Crimea in around 3 weeks, the same amount of time this war has raged so far. Ukraine's resistance, propped up by weapons sent from the West, has been greater than Mr. Putin had calculated, experts said. A member of a territorial defense unit makes tea while guarding a defensive position on the outskirts of Kiev on March 17, 2022 in Kiev, Ukraine. That's clear by the way Russian forces are nowing civilian targets indiscriminately. They are also showing signs of being stretched to their limits. A public intelligence assessment report released Tuesday by the UK Defence Ministry said that Russia was calling up reinforcements from across the entire country. New satellite images from Maxa Technologies show that on Monday the word children was spelled out in Russian in 2 areas outside the theatre that was aired today. This includes the eastern section of the Russian Federation, troops in the Pacific Fleet and Armenia, as well as fighters from private military companies, Syrians, and other mercenaries. Ms. Braw said that the stall in Russian forces movement was likely the result of Russia working out next steps. Russia clearly counted on a swift and decisive success, which didn't happen. They face more united, better trained Ukrainian fighters than Russia appreciated, she said. So they went to Plan B, which was brutal warfare, but Ukraine is standing firm. They are winning back towns. They recently liberated a local mayor who was taken captive. So if that's not working, what's Plan C? At the very least, Ukraine's resistance has put the country in a better place for negotiations with Mr. Putin than it would have been at the start of the war, Ms. Braw said. What Mr. Putin won't want is to lose many more soldiers, she added.